what's our capacity, given the experience that we've had, let's say in the past year and a half on the Syrian question? What kind of capacity do we have in Calgary?
The good news is that as we brought in the Syrian refugee families over the last year, we actually created capacity by creating linkages between agencies, figuring out how to really improve the system. So it's relatively easy for us to gear up the system again, as long as, of course, the funding is in place. And so what I'm calling for is a twofold strategy that I'd love to see from the federal government and the new minister. The first is, in the very short term, we have people who are desperate, who are seeking terror, who are fleeing terror, who are fleeing violence. And we need to make sure that we are available to help them. And the easiest, fastest way to do this is for the federal government to lift the cap on privately sponsored refugees and make that system work much faster. We know that the private system is the envy of the world, where groups of 5 come together and sponsor a refugee family. It works really well. The people integrate quickly, so I think that is probably an easy way to move forward. And I understand that Conservatives and New Democrats are all calling for that. It's probably a great idea. In the medium term, we do need to stop and look at the numbers that we're expecting across Canada to determine if there is additional capacity. If there is, we should take it and take more people. As always, my number one concern is the availability of language training. I really believe that getting people English and French language training, depending on where they live, is the single biggest contributor to their long-term success. And we've seen that on the formal language training side. We haven't gone as quickly as I would like here in Calgary. That's why I'm encouraging Calgarians who want to volunteer to help newcomers to volunteer in informal language training sessions. Your public library, your local YMCA will have conversation cafes where you can join and just help people practice their English. And that is a really helpful, very concrete thing you can do.
Are you thinking, like Calgary's number is like 3,400 in the past year? Are you thinking we're capable of that kind of level, or not quite as much?
You know,
more?
in any given year, when it's not on the front page of the news, Calgary accepts 1,500 or so, sometimes more, sometimes a bit less refugees, and our system is well geared towards that. Last year we accepted a lot more, but in the context of migration to Calgary, before the economic downturn, we were accepting 40,000 people a year into Calgary. And to accept 1,000 refugees, particularly as our net migration has gone down and our vacancy rates are higher than they've been in the past, I can't see that being a problem as long as the funding follows them.
What else would we need in terms of support here in Calgary right away if we were to accept more?
Number one issue is always housing. And certainly the private landlords came to the table incredibly generously with housing solutions last year. And with our vacancy rates continuing to be high, I see that as something that would continue. Once we have housing and language training in place, the rest of things tend to fall into place, but those are really the two critical ones.
Any concerns about the jobless rate? We heard at that forum that was held on Monday, for the government-sponsored refugees, it's about 40% have managed to find jobs, but for the private placements, it's about 60% managed to find jobs.
Yeah, that's one of the great ways that the private sponsorship program works really well, because when families and church groups really have a stake in these folks, they can help them get that all-important first Canadian job in order to get Canadian experience. A lot of this is about person-to-person contact. I know many small businesses who, even though they're struggling right now, are willing to put a little more on the table and give a newcomer that first job. I still remember last year, a fellow who owns a bunch of McDonald's in town said, these are not great jobs, but they're jobs. And we certainly have the ability, he didn't say they're not great jobs, let me quote that again. These are entry-level jobs, but they're jobs. And they give people that all-important Canadian experience and the ability to integrate into the workforce. And I expect we'll see a lot of generosity there too, because even while our unemployment rate is high, it remains my number one priority. It doesn't mean there are no jobs. And it also does mean that there are opportunities for people to be able to move into that all-important first job.
At this morning's committee meeting,
yes.
Expand on the pitch that you made for here to be a test.
Yeah, it's not much of a pitch. It's pretty straightforward, is that we've got a crisis. We're losing 2 or 3 people a week to overdose in Calgary. We're using Narcan or naloxone every day here in the city. This is all fast. It's happened quickly, and if British Columbia is any indication, it's only going to get worse. People are dying, And we have to figure out ways of helping them. And certainly the current system has not proven itself adequate towards dealing with this crisis. So as always, I'm looking for innovation, I'm looking for evidence, and I'm willing to experiment and be pilot projects here in Calgary to try and find things that work. The situation is desperate, and we have to do something about it.
So what does that look like? Is that federal and provincial money coming to the municipality and it doing what it needs to support this on the ground?
I don't really know yet. I certainly got the sense from the federal health minister that she too was willing to try new things, to try things that haven't been done before in Canada, and to do it quickly. And I said, trying new things, gathering evidence, doing pilot projects, and being innovative and moving quickly, well, that describes Calgary. So that may be what we need to do. But we need to see certainly new treatment modalities. We need to have a very serious conversation about what works and what doesn't work in harm reduction, including safe consumption sites. I don't want to just photocopy what they have in Vancouver. I want to make sure that we're trying something that really gives people the ability to lead full and productive lives, as well as keep them alive and keep them safe.
Are these decisions and innovation that has to happen quite quickly, given?
Yesterday, people are dying. And if we can cut red tape and move forward, I think we've got the political will to do that here in Calgary.
Is the province on board with this?
I don't know yet. I know that the federal health minister has had lots of meetings with her provincial counterparts. I know that Alberta has always been seen as a place where we can do innovation in healthcare, and so I'd like to see that move forward.
On Tuesday night, CPC watched an officer who's been working with the force for a while resign publicly. Very emotional, powerful. What do you think about what's happened?
It was an extraordinary, heart-wrenching thing to watch. It's an awful situation, and as I've been saying for months now, we have certain expectations as a city and as a city council, and those expectations include that every single person who enters a career in the city, including in the Calgary Police Service, regardless of their background, their gender, their ethnicity, their religion, should have the opportunity to have a great career. And there are things that are unacceptable in a modern workforce. You don't send dirty pictures by text message, for example, to your coworkers. This is not rocket science. We've got to have a service that is welcoming and where people feel safe going to work every single day and don't feel harassed and don't feel threatened, and certainly don't feel harassed or threatened for actually speaking out about how things can be better. So we have some expectations, and I know that the Police Commission and the Chief, and I've got full confidence in them, are working hard on what they can do to fix this. It involves a better system to support those whistleblowers and those who have concerns about the system and how we can support them better. It means making expectations very clear across the system on what kinds of behaviors are acceptable and unacceptable within the system, and it means supporting those who come forward to make sure that everybody has the ability to be heard, and it means ensuring that our system of human resources is sufficiently flexible to be able to provide everyone a great career. So if you're coming back from mat leave, you can do so without actually harming your career progression. That there are opportunities to work part-time, to look after your family, to think about jobs that don't involve overnight shift work not being lesser jobs in your career progression, but being jobs that actually can still help you succeed and be promoted.
Do you have a message for that officer?
I'm so sorry that this has happened to you. We believe you, we will support you, and I hope that you will still consider having a career at the Calgary Police Service, because it's people like you who are great officers, who are great public servants, who deserve better.
There's been a lot of talk lately about all of the vacancy rate downtown, and we have these innovative and this and that. I guess where do you see that fitting in with what's happening in the States and this thought that people from Silicon Valley could be part of Vancouver or here?
We need to take opportunity where we find it. And in a world where the fashion seems to be closed borders, closed minds, closed hearts, being insular, it's time for Canada and for Calgary to be out of fashion and to really focus on opening ourselves up to brains, to people, to ideas, and to investment. And we happen to be in a spot right now where we can actually do that because we have the space, We have the support staff available for investors who want to come here. So we're going to be spending a lot of time very methodically, very purposefully showing people the opportunities that exist here in Calgary. I think that we are actually at a critical moment in Canadian history where we can define ourselves for the next century if we manage this correctly, and we can get enormous benefit for ourselves. So you're going to see a lot more of me talking about things like this in the United States and abroad about the great opportunities there are to invest here in Calgary.
Kind of along those lines, we're doing a wage love edition of Metro tomorrow.
what?
Waging love instead of
Oh, wage love, love
Yes.
it.
And we're kind of wondering if you can briefly just talk about your experience growing up in Calgary and how you, your faith and how you spread love.
You know, I grew up in Northeast Calgary in a very, very diverse neighborhood. Diverse by ethnicity, diverse by income, diverse by age, a real mixed neighborhood. And when I was in elementary school, we had a significant change in our neighborhood, which is we welcomed many, many, many families from Vietnam who were fleeing. And we called them boat people. And they changed the tenor of my community in a way only for the better. And that is an experience that has always stuck with me as an example of how we, being welcoming and open-minded and open-hearted, can bring people in. You know, when I was first elected, I haven't talked about this in a long time, but when I was first elected, the day after I was elected, I suddenly found myself extremely famous all over the world. I wasn't expecting that, because they didn't want to talk about my brilliant campaign or my great ideas for cities or my outstanding hair, or even my ethnic background. They wanted to talk about my faith. And I was a bit struck by that, because growing up in Calgary, I never for 1 second thought there was any job in this city that I couldn't do because of my faith. Maybe rabbi. But that we really take for granted in Canada. We don't recognize how unique that is in this country and in this city. And I think it's important for us, especially today, to reach out our arms and go, we still believe that. And the most beautiful thing that happened this week for me was I was speaking at this giant interfaith vigil, probably 1,000 people in the room, night before last. And the young rabbi from Beth Tzedek Synagogue came up, and he just said very plainly and very simply, I want all my Muslim brothers and sisters to know that the Jewish community stands up for you and will fight for you. It was an extraordinary moment. It's something you wouldn't see anywhere in the world. And the very best part of the meeting for me is that that young rabbi was sitting next to a friend of mine who is a young leader in the Muslim community, and they had the same beard. They were united in hipsterdom over being divided by faith, and it was awesome, and they had their arms around one another for the whole thing. And to me, it just really spoke about who we are here in this community.
Switching gears a little bit, in terms of the Olympic bids, can you talk a little bit about how costs, do you know what costs are looking like, whether they'll be on track at this point?
The City Council has granted $5 million for display exploration work. The biggest chunk of that is going to the actual creation of a hosting plan, and as Council already has heard, the hosting plan is very useful, even if we choose not to bid on the Olympics, because it gives us a real sense of the city's ability to host very large-scale events in terms of what hotel rooms do we have, what transportation networks do we have, as well as what facilities can fit modern standards from conventions to sporting events. So it's a very useful thing. I understand that they are certainly looking at coming in at or below their budget by the time they get here in July, and that their resources are really focused on creating that content.
Do you have any thoughts on if the paid members who are below the volunteer board and who had all their names announced in their biographies, if we should know who's doing that paid work?
Oh, I have many thoughts on that question. I was, which are they? Is the follow-up question? I was surprised to see that that information was being withheld. I have asked for a very good rationale for why that is being withheld, because frankly, I would like to celebrate the great people they've hired. I'd like to celebrate the expertise and experience of people who are willing to come for a short-term contract to help us with this very, very big problem. So that is a conversation that I am continuing to have.
Do you buy the rationale that it's a privacy issue?
I do not. So I want to understand if there is more of a rationale.
Do you know these people? These are truly talented.
I know some of them. I don't even know all of them. But I do know some of them, and I know they've hired some really, really outstanding people on a short-term contract.
All right, thanks, folks.
Sir, I don't know
Oh,
if
didn't you have?
I was going to say, I don't know if I'll see you tomorrow, so looking ahead to Monday's council meeting, can you tell us much of what might be on the agenda in terms of the marijuana issue?
No, because I'm really looking forward to the meeting. We actually have convened a panel. We brought in some experts from other places to really talk to us about what the city's response and reaction is going to have to be from a zoning perspective, from a bylaw perspective, and so on marijuana. So I'm really looking forward to it. It'll be a good opportunity for us to really get our heads around some pretty significant change that we're expecting from the federal legislation.
Calgary specific in terms of how Calgary handles some of those issues? I think of like, the zoning, the clustering issues.
I think those are issues that a lot of municipalities will face, and I don't want to speak out of turn because I don't know exactly which experts are coming, but I understand we have people from municipalities that have gone through this who will either be there in person or who have supplied some thoughts. And I think, frankly, the work that we do here will probably be useful for all municipalities in Canada.
So is Calgary paying those people to come in, or are they here for a conference coincidentally?
I actually don't know the answer to that question. I think a lot of, I do know that, for example, when I met with the mayor of Denver, that both the city of Denver and the government of Colorado had been very, very, very focused on becoming data warehouses when it happened there, so that they would have that information to share, and they've been extraordinarily generous with sharing that information to date.